Baruch Hu et Adonai Hamavarach.
Baruch Adonai Hamivarach Leolam Ba'ed.
Baruch Adonai Hamavarach Leolam Vayed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amim V'natan Lanu et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah.
Amen.
Bless the Lord who is blessed.
Bless the Lord who is blessed forever and ever.
Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has chosen us from among the nations and has given us his Torah.
Blessed are you, O Lord,
who gives the Torah.
Good job. Thank you. Good morning. I wonder if dead people can sign the petition for. Yeah. We saw things this week that we never thought we'd ever see. And Doug and I were talking last night, and I was thinking to myself, when the Lord comes back, there's going to be a whole lot of trouble for a lot of people. We must shift our focus, right? And realize that politics are not going to save us. I don't care what party you belong to or what theory you support or whatever. I think now let's quote an old song, the battle lines have been drawn, and it is time now to shift our focus to the things that matter. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. As a matter of fact, as I was putting this little Parshah together, it occurred to me that this might be the only human resources department that works. It's made up of a department of one, and we're going to investigate and find out a little bit more about that HR department. This is the book of Sh'mot, which means names in Hebrew, names. Although the Greek, Exodus, has the context of the people leaving Israel. When you read the first couple of words in the book of Exodus, you come across the word Sh'mot, and it's all about names, and so it gets into that whole context very early on. This is kind of a key themes page. Doug is continuing to exercise great patience in teaching me how to preach, and at some point in time, I think probably before the Messiah comes, I'll get it all figured out. But one of the things that we're finding is that it is always good to put historical and cultural context into the talk so that you can kind of see where the people were, what was going on. And so before I move on here, I just wanted to say good morning or good afternoon to our friends on Zoom. I know we've got people watching from all over the country. We've kind of expanded our reach, which is kind of neat. So hello, Zoomers. Sh'mot is Hebrew for names. As I mentioned, it is both the name of the book and the name of the first Parshah of the book. So Exodus is the Greek Septuagint name for the book itself and the title. It is made up, so here's a trivia question, might be a good bar bet for you, 6,700 Hebrew letters, 1,700 Hebrew words, 124 verses, 215 lines in a Torah scroll. In our Hebrew class this morning, opened up our Torah scroll, which is sitting right over here, and we saw just how incredibly beautiful these scrolls are written, and we're gonna do some of this in a few weeks. But this is a kind of a synopsis of the book itself. Sh'mot is read on the 13th Shabbat after Simchat Torah, generally in late December or January, depending on how the calendar falls that year. God takes an active role in Israel's exit from Egypt and that eventual journey to Canaan. He sometimes will appear in the form of the angel of the Lord. Sometimes it's just him without seeing him, and he will train and develop Moses into Israel's leader and commander. But Moses' earlier years are going to be pulled out today, and we're going to look at it might be a little different look at Moses than you've had before. His career begins as a shepherd in Jethro's family business. Jethro apparently was a sheep herder and had quite a number of sheep. And in fact, when the children of Israel do approach Mount Horeb, that's basically Moses' home. I didn't realize that until I was digging into the details here, that he had been very familiar with the area. In fact, it's an area called Midian, and we're going to talk about Midian in a couple minutes. So he's working there in Jethro's family. In fact, it may have been a franchise for all I know. They are his distant cousins. The Midianites are distant cousins through Abraham's line and his third wife, Keturah. So Moses is actually hanging out with family, which is kind of nice. They're about 7 or 8 generations down. And so it's interesting because Moses has got lineage here from both sides of the family. Israel will eventually grow to about 2 million people by the time they leave Egypt, which becomes, of course, as we know later in the story, quite a big concern to this particular Pharaoh. Israel's suffering and deliverance under Pharaoh are recorded as historical events, which, of course, all of this is. But there's also another piece that from time to time, there are types, models, allegories, and so forth. And one of those actually is stated clearly in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. So Moses that literally takes the entire desert journey, compresses it into a one chapter look. And in 1 Corinthians 10, we begin to see some of the spiritual elements behind the story of Egypt and Moses. So that's kind of an interesting thing for you to look up if you want. And of course, later on, God's tabernacle and the implements, the last about 15 chapters of Exodus from 25 to 40 are featured in about the last third of the book. In fact, it's interesting because when we talk about spiritual gifts, one of the things we always go to Romans chapter 12, we go to 1 Corinthians chapter 12. One of the things that I've always been kind of intrigued about is the gifting that is given to Bezalel and Oholiab in the book of Exodus, chapter 25 through 40. They are jewelers, they are tapestry experts, they're metallurgists and so forth. And it's interesting because see, I appreciate the people that know how to work with their hands. See, I can't. I have trouble doing anything with my hands. And so when I see people that can build and fix and create and repair, it is, to me, it's beyond my understanding. So to me, that's spiritual, and I'll let you take that for what it's worth. Not every career begins with a traditional path. Jane, as we were talking this morning, Jane's career was not traditional. She woke up at some point in her adulthood and said, I got more work to do. And if I looked around the congregation today, and for those of you online, I would imagine that many of you have been taking classes maybe even beyond your original high school years, maybe college, maybe graduate school. One of the things that I learned, in fact, Boeing set this as a value, as a matter of fact, for its employees, was the concept of lifelong learning, meaning that you're always on a path of learning. And if we're paying attention to the narrative of our lives, God continues to teach us as we get older and older, assuming, of course, we are getting older and older. We're going to be talking about something very interesting on Monday night as Sarah gives birth to a child at 90, and Abraham becomes a father at 100. And the rabbis have a very interesting look on this thing. They believe that their bodies were kind of rejuvenated and refreshed. And I thought to myself, what would that look like? All I know is I've got bad back, bad knees, bad ankles, bad everything, and I'm falling apart fast. But the scripture says there's going to be a time where we're going to get new bodies. And I don't know about you, but I'm looking real forward to that. I'm looking forward to being able to bend over without making the noises my dad used to make in the morning when he woke up. I'm looking real forward to that. Not every career begins with a traditional path. Let's investigate what the book of Exodus has to say about that. There's a little bit of context here. This is Moses' career path, and we're going to jump ahead a little bit into the book of Acts in chapter 7, in verse 22 through 25. So Moses was educated in all the wisdom. Interesting word here. The word is Sophia. So if you know of anybody named Sophia, Chuck and Carol, of course, your granddaughter, that word means wisdom in Greek. And so he was educated in the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was proficient in speaking. And the word there is logos, or logos, as the case may be, and actions. So Moses demonstrates a lot of education. But it's interesting because when the narrative is picked up in the desert here, Moses is somewhere around 80 years old. He's been out there for a while. And he starts out, of course, we have roughly the first 40 years in Egypt, and we know that he was, this tells us something that Exodus does not tell us. Moses had an enormous amount of education before he ever got out there in the desert. And this, I'm sure the rabbinical authorities would probably go off on this one, but if you want an interesting perspective on this, Chuck Missler does a very interesting job explaining just the medical arts that were in place at the time. And he will go through a whole list of what you might find in the Pharaoh's medical or in his medicine cabinet. It wasn't pretty. In verse 23, but when he was approaching the age of 40, so this gives us some context here about his age, it enters into his mind to visit his countrymen, the sons of Israel. So I'm guessing that, as it said, the Benson commentary there said that Moses knew of his heritage and wanted to learn more. Now, I'm not sure here if he ran a 23andMe check or did any kind of any type of a background check on himself. And by the way, one of the things that really I love is on YouTube from time to time, I will see these incredible family reunions of identical twins or triplets separated at birth, and they find each other when they get older. And they discover these incredible things about themselves. And so Moses needed to know something about his background, and the Spirit, I guess, just lights on him, and then he goes back into his history, and he wants to know more because he's been raised in the court of Pharaoh, but he knows he's a Hebrew. When he saw one of them being treated unjustly, he defended and took vengeance. Isn't that interesting? Moses took vengeance. We know that Moses has an anger problem, which comes out later in part of the desert journey with all the, I don't know what it would be like to be, running a group of 2 million people in the desert that really was not really a people yet at all. Anyway, so he takes vengeance for the oppressed man by fatally striking the Egyptian. So now Moses can add to his resume, he's a killer. You don't want to think about that, but Moses has now taken the life of somebody with his own hands. Now we could defend it by saying it was self-defense, but it doesn't look like it because Moses enters into this fight and it really wasn't his business. But he gets involved because, well, he had compassion for his countrymen. And so we could understand that because he's defending somebody that he knew, and maybe there's something good with that. But it doesn't necessarily give him the permission to do that. But it's interesting because, you want people in your community to come to your rescue, and maybe we can look at it from that perspective. So he thought that his brothers understood that God was granting them deliverance through him. So his self-perception was, I'm the good guy here. I'm riding the white horse. But they did not understand that. So he is now recognizing that he's unappreciated. And one of the greatest lessons that I've learned over time, and boy, I tell you what, it came to me in spades this week, watching the Capitol get, I don't even know what the word is, attacked? Maybe that's a good word. I'm not sure if that's the right one. But I learned something that all of us need to kind of keep in mind, and that is that perception drives reality. I learned this as a very hard lesson in Boeing. I used to think that people would inform themselves, make decisions that were intelligent. Boy, did I learn something. Thank you. That was, but it's the opposite. We tend to act on the things that we think are real. And now if you watch the media, I'm going to get a little political here. If you watch the media across the board, print media, electronic media, everybody, mainstream, CBS, NBC, ABC, the big players on YouTube, what they're reporting on Wednesday is something they called an insurrection and I can't remember the other word they used. I guess it was okay, sorry? Yeah, sedition is another one, thank you. It was okay during the summer to burn down buildings, wipe out cities, and destroy lives and businesses. Hundreds of thousands of businesses looting, destroyed. Those businesses were the work of people's hands they had done for all their lives. And I was watching the picture that Jane showed a few minutes ago. I think Tommy Trojan was the only statue that made it through. It's amazing what we're seeing now. And this is what Moses, he thought he was doing the right thing, but boy, I tell you what, the perception of the Israelites right next to him there was not the same. And this is a lesson we can all learn, especially going forward in the future. How are we going to be perceived as believers in the community? Because you know what? A whole lot of us are being made to look like Moses, unwelcomed, unappreciated. And this is going to be a battle that the battle has been drawn. People are in the street, and we are facing the battle of our lives. The career path continues and extends into Acts 7:26 through 7:26 to 29. On the following day, he appeared to them as they were fighting each other. So now the two Hebrews are fighting one another, and he tried to reconcile them to peace. Hey, there's nothing wrong with that, right? Reconciliation is one of my favorite words. In fact, going forward in my life, I want to see people make peace with one another. Relationships heal. Families come back together again. This is what God's expecting of us, I believe. I think these are Yeshua's great wishes for us to find a way to put the past behind us and reconcile these relationships in love. But these Hebrews here looked at him and said, Moses said to them, "You're brothers. What are you doing? Why are you fighting? Why are you injuring each other?" But the one who was injuring his neighbor pushed him away, saying, "Who made you a ruler and a judge over us?" Moses got surprised. His intervention was not well received. You do not intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian yesterday, do you? Moses suddenly realizes not only did they distrust him, but what he thought was being done in private was actually now public knowledge. That's a terrifying thought to me. Terrifying. What we think we're doing privately, the Lord said it's going to be shouted from the rooftops. Check your privilege. I don't know what else to say. At this remark, Moses fled and became a stranger in the land of Midian. This is where the story is going to pick up in just a minute. He fathers two sons. Interesting little comment about that. That's going to come up later. So Pharaoh, and then the scripture we learn in Exodus, the Pharaoh basically puts a hit out on him, which is interesting because he was raised in the house of Pharaoh. He knew all the Egyptian customs. He knew the laws. He was being raised probably to be somebody in the court. But finally, we realize here that Pharaoh's going to kill him. We'll learn that later on. So what happens when God shows up? To this point, Moses' track record isn't what you might consider very exemplary, is it? He's got trouble right here in River City. He's killed an Egyptian. He's hunted by Egyptian authority and rejected by his own countrymen. If you've ever felt isolated, if you've ever felt unappreciated, if you've ever felt alone, you can relate to Moses. We might say he is persona non grata with pretty much everybody he knows. He flees Egypt for Midian. There's these little details pop up there, and I go, why Midian? Well, that's where family was. Distant family, certainly. In fact, even later, we learn, and I think it was in 1 Samuel, or David flees to Moab. And why would David want to go to Moab? Well, that's where his great-grandmother lived, Ruth. So these family relationships, as you study the genealogies and little details, which we're doing a lot in Genesis, when you study these details, you begin to see this bigger picture come together. It's fascinating. He's a broken man. He's broken. He's been out there hanging out with Jethro's sheep now for about 40 years. Have you ever been close to a sheep? They don't smell very good. Moses is probably pretty ripe at this point. And then God shows up. Moses is about to have his first interview. In chapter 3 of Exodus, now Moses was pasturing the flock of his father-in-law Jethro, right? He's joined the family business. This is an old joke within Jewish communities, actually. I'll never forget. Don Rickles did something a long time ago. When was the last time Don Rickles was mentioned in a Messianic Bible study? But and he had a young Jewish couple in front of him, and he looks at the young man and the young woman. He said, "Congratulations on being married." And they said, "Thank you." And then he looks at them and he says, "Yeah, so he looks at the girl and he says, if your father dies, what kind of work is he out of?" In other words, the kid has been put into the family business, right? So this is an interesting thing. Moses is out there with the sheep. He's pasturing, he's flock, whatever he's doing out there, he's doing it and he's pretty good at it. Then the angel of the Lord appears to him, and this is one of those appearances that you scratch your head and you go, John talked about this a few weeks ago. This divine being that captures Moses' attention along, of course, with the burning bush, because he doesn't really understand it. And he says, this blazing fire from the midst of a bush, and he looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, and yet, as we know, it was not consumed. So Moses said, I must turn aside and see this marvelous sight while the bush is not burned up. And so I'm guessing here, Moses is realizing that he's now not just with the sheep, but something else is happening. What did he know about God? It isn't real clear from the other scriptures, but this one kind of gets your attention. So God offers Moses a job that he can't refuse. This might sound a little familiar to you. Let's take a look. Exodus 3:10, this is the interview. Again, human resources. This is the only human resources department on the planet that's ever worked. And now in verse 10, now come and I will send you to Pharaoh. Now Moses is going, what's going on here? So that you may bring my people, the sons of Israel, out of Egypt. So 40 years before this, as we talked about a minute ago, Moses was being hunted by Pharaoh and his Hebrew brethren. The question is his authority. You got to be thinking to yourself, Moses is going, wait a minute. They want me dead. Pretty much everybody wants me dead, and they don't respect me. This is where God comes in. All of us have experienced something in our lives where we're thinking to ourselves, what good is my life? Why am I here? What's going on? And Moses is about to find out that God's got a plan for his life. He registers his objections to God's offer. Man, this is classic. Let's take a look. Exodus 3:11, during the interview, Moses says to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh? In other words, I can kind of hear the mind going here. What are you thinking? That I should bring the sons of Israel out of Egypt? Are you kidding me? They don't want me there. This can be called Moses' first objection. This is an objection. If you've ever been in sales, you know that the successful people in sales have learned to overcome objections. God's looking at this situation and saying, I got work for you to do. Pay attention. And Moses is going, wait a minute, I'm not so sure I like this. And then God answers, assuredly, I will be with you, and this shall be the sign to you. That is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall worship God at this mountain. Now, Moses is very familiar with the territory. As I mentioned before, he's had flocks of sheep there for many, many years. He knows the ground. He's very, 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 comfortable where he is. And God then counters Moses' objection. Be careful when God starts countering your objection. When you say, God, I really don't want to do this. God's going, I got work for you to do. Just learn from this lesson. In 13, the interview continues, and Moses says to God, behold, I'm going to the sons of Israel, and I will say to them, the God of your fathers has sent me to you. So you can almost see this sort of face-to-face interaction, right, with the angel, I'm guessing. Now, they may say to me, what is his name? So Moses is bringing up an objection. He's saying, well, who am I going to tell him sent me? What shall I say to them? Second objection. And God's pretty patient at this point, but that's going to change. God says to Moses, I am who I am. I love that. I am who I am. I am who I am. And he said, this is what you're going to say to the sons of Israel. I am has sent me to you. This is the counter to the second objection. That's pretty powerful stuff. In chapter 4, verse 1, Moses then says, but what if they don't believe me or listen to what I say? They might say, the Lord has not appeared to you. Remember, Moses' credibility was not exactly what you would call good at that point with the Israelites. He was a known killer, and he thought he had the authority because he was pretty much known, I guess, in Egypt, and his brethren did not accept that authority. This is his third objection. It's getting interesting now. God counters Moses' third objection by a demonstration of his power. What is it going to take for us? What is it going to take for us? Do we have to push God this far? So, first sign, Exodus 4:2-5, the Lord said to him, "What's that in your hand?" He says, "A staff." God, you can just see God's kind of shaking his head. "Well, throw it on the ground." So he threw it on the ground and it turns into a serpent. And Moses flees from it. This is Mr. Tough Guy who is, working with all these large animals. And you can figure, like David, who defended his sheep, you can figure there's been more than one time where Moses has been face to face with having to defend his sheep, because that's what happens out there in the desert. Things get pretty wild. But Moses is demonstrating fear of a snake, which is kind of interesting. So he's, this scares him. And God says, but the Lord said to him, "Reach out your hand and grasp it by the tail." And I'm thinking to myself, not on your life. Not on your life. I don't like snakes. Some of you might like snakes. And maybe you're good at handling them, but I'm not. And I I see them and I just they have these strange eyes. You ever look at them closely? So he reaches out with his hand and he catches it and he turns the staff, or turns it into a staff right in his hand. And we've all seen the Ten Commandments movie, so you know what that looks like. So they, the Ziknaim Israel, the elders of Israel, may believe there's a purpose in this whole thing, this little drama that God works out, that the elders may believe that the Lord, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob, one of the songs that we sang this morning, right? Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Ve Elohei Yaakov, that they recognize that I have appeared to you. And we're going to jump in a little ahead here into some of Yeshua's words, because this echoed my mind, just bouncing around my head a little bit. I wanted to share this with you. You remember Yeshua's words from John 10:37-39. "If I don't do the works of my Father, don't believe me. But if I do them, even though you don't believe me, believe the works. Believe the works, so that you may know and understand that the Father is in me and I in the Father." So these very powerful works demonstrated right in front of Moses are designed to teach him to take this word to the elders of Israel and say, look, God's on the move here. Pay attention. Speaks to his credibility. And the question we have to ask ourselves now, especially now, in light of all the things we've seen the last several months, do we stand as credible to an unsaved world? How credible are we as believers? It's a tough one. It doesn't mean you're perfect, but it does mean that we have work to do. More signs, of course, more signs. In Exodus 4:6-9, this is kind of a little synopsis here. God causes leprosy to form on Moses' hand. Just as quickly he reverses the curse when Moses puts his hand into his vestment. The Lord then tells Moses, if the first two signs don't convince the Egyptians, then I want you to take some water from the Nile, pour it on the ground, and it will turn to blood, and that certainly will get Pharaoh's attention. God, obviously, as we always know, is always outflanking the enemy. You can never get ahead of God. He's going to be ahead of you no matter where you go. Remember what Jonah said? No matter where I go, there you are. And Moses is beginning to understand this. Here's a question. Is it okay for Moses to demonstrate a little fear or insecurity, a little anxiety? He's human. It's natural. How about us? The minute you begin to think you are bigger than your circumstances and you're doing it on your own, think again. Doesn't mean you can't get out in front of it, but it does mean that you recognize where the source of your power comes from. Let's take a look and see what Moses did. Oh, that's right. Moses files another objection, of course. Exodus 4:10, Moses says to the Lord, please, Lord, I've never been eloquent, neither recently nor in time past, nor since you've spoken to your servant. For I'm slow of speech and slow or heavy of tongue. Oh boy, the commentators love to talk about this one. There is Charles Ellicott was a 19th century English British commentator, wrote volumes on the scripture. And he says this, that according to a Jewish tradition, he was unable to pronounce what they call the labials. Now for our Hebrew students here, that's the bet, and the fe, and the mem, and the pei, and the vav. Those are the letters. Or as we would see it as English speakers, the B, the F, the M, the P, and the V. Apparently, it is understood that Moses was heavy or slow of speech and possibly had a speech impediment. In fact, some of the commentators believe he stuttered, which is very possible. This is his fourth objection. Now he's bringing his insecurities. In a way, he's really being honest with the Lord. He's saying, you know what? This is kind of scary to me. I don't speak well in public. Jane, you did a beautiful job today. I thought to myself, boy, for somebody who doesn't speak very well in public, you do great. I was terrified to speak in public until I was in my 40s. And Boeing, basically, one of the greatest gifts I ever got was being forced to do a presentation for 500 managers every month. And that got me up and over my fear of speaking in public. Now I can't shut up. God answers the objection in 11 and 12. But the Lord said to him, who has made the human mouth? Or who makes anyone unable to speak or deaf or able to see or blind? You know, it's interesting later when Yeshua begins to do miracles, these were miracles that were done that could only be done by the Messiah. It's interesting, it gets placed here in Exodus. Is it not I, the Lord? Now then go, I and myself will be with your mouth, or I myself will be with your mouth and instruct you in what you are to say. Can you imagine having that confidence? We know what happens in the book of Acts when Yeshua says, look, just get out there. I'm going to tell you what to say. I'm going to be with you. And it's nice to know that this extension of a promise is with us now. When that time comes, we're going to be empowered to say the right things at the right time. This is his fourth objection. And God answers it by saying, look, I'm going to be with you. Calm down, Moses. It's going to be fine. Now, Moses has pushed God to the point where he's going to kind of push back a little bit. In verse 13, chapter 4, he says, please, Lord, now send the message to whomever you will. Fifth objection, Lord, use somebody else. Send the message out, carrier pigeon. I don't care how you do it, but you know what? I'm not the guy. And now God is going to answer. The 14th through 17th verses there, then the anger of the Lord burned against Moses. I don't want to be there. I don't want God to be mad at me. I hope his anger is going to be stayed from us. Don't push him too far. Is there not your brother Aaron the Levite? I know that he speaks fluently. So Aaron apparently was eloquent where Moses was not. And moreover, behold, he's coming out to meet you. When he sees you, he's going to be overjoyed. Moses had not seen Aaron in who knows how many years. And here is an opportunity for a reconciliation within the family. How great is this? So you are to speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I myself will be with your mouth and his mouth, and I will instruct you in what you are to do. You know, being willing to receive instruction, being willing to learn as we get older, being willing to be teachable, which has been kind of an ongoing theme we've been sharing with you for several years, actually. This is the time, your ability to soften, our ability to soften, to become teachable, is critical. God willing, we remain soft at heart, willing to listen to God's instruction. He shall speak for you to the people, and he will be as a mouth for you. And then one of the greatest little phrases, and ye will be as God to him. So whatever Moses speaks is going to have authority. The very authority that Moses tried to grab years before, God is going to now implant in him in some fashion. And in verse 17, and you shall take your staff in your hand, or in your hand the staff with which you shall perform the signs. This staff is going to be evident throughout Moses' life. He's going to carry it into battle. He's going to do the miracles in Pharaoh's court. And boy, I tell you what, the rabbinical writers have a field day with what the staff is all about. Interesting. So this is how God counters Moses' fifth objection. He does it in his power, and he does it by visible, demonstrable miracles. And then a little later on, there's this incident kind of comes out of nowhere as Moses is headed back to Egypt. In verses 24 through 26, but it came about at the overnight encampment on the way, the Lord met Moses and sought to put him to death. And this kind of comes out of nowhere, and you're going, what's going on here? So Zipporah, his wife, Jethro's daughter, takes a flint and cuts off her, it's kind of blunt, isn't it? Or sharp, I should say, cuts off her son's foreskin and throws it at Moses' feet. And she says, you're indeed a groom of blood to me. God wanted to take Moses out because he had not done his duty. Oh, by the way, the Mosaic law wasn't in place yet. Nothing had been written down. This goes back to the time of Abraham, this circumcision ritual. So he left him alone. At the time she said, you are a groom of blood, mentioned a second time, which means there's emphasis there because of the circumcision. So God has demonstrated his anger, and Moses has escaped death yet again. But I'm guessing here Moses is getting the message. Finishing strong makes a difference. Finishing strong makes a difference. Every one of our lives is checkered. I don't care who you are and how perfect you think you led your life. I have a checkered past. You have a checkered past. We've sinned. We've fallen short of the glory of God. But there's still time to recover. And there's still time to make reconciliation. And there's still time to get closer to God. Let's take a look. From Hebrews 11, 24 through 29, by faith, Moses, I love that term, by faith, Moses, when he had grown up, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. So he rejects his Egyptian upbringing because he knows who he is, choosing rather to endure ill treatment with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, not mentioned in Exodus anywhere. But Hebrews, the writer to the Hebrews, then clarifies this aspect of Moses' life. Considering the reproach of Messiah greater riches than the treasures of Egypt, for he was looking to the reward. Just like Abraham and Sarah were looking for a city whose maker and builder was God. Right? There was a promise on the horizon. Isn't it interesting when we learn how to drive? We're always told not to look at the steering wheel or right in front of us, but we're told to look down the road. That's what this, I think, implies. By faith he left Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is unseen. How's that? How do you see something that's unseen? God finds a way. And this is where Moses' resume comes into place. Pretty interesting interview, right? God's human resource department's working perfectly. The interview is pretty much done now. Here's Moses' resume at the end of his training. He accepts God's mantle of leadership, and he eventually fills the following offices. He becomes a leader of 2 million people. By the way, we think it's about 2 million. We know from the book of Numbers, in the opening chapters, there are about 603,000 men that are capable of going to war. So that meant that there were wives, and that meant there were children. And when you do the math and you look at the numbers, it's about 2 to 3 million. Even if you take the conservative number, about 2 million. Orange County is 3 million, 3.2 million, I think. Just to kind of give you a perspective on the size of this number of people. And when you look at it, you go, how did Moses manage with no internet, no PowerPoint, no Microsoft Word, no Excel, no ability to, all they had to do was not, I mean, it's amazing what they were able to do back then. Were they carrying an abacus with them? I don't know. I have no idea what was going on, but I do know this. Moses led 2 million people into the desert. That's a pretty amazing thing. No microphones, no lights, no nothing. They were just out there. God found a way to help him out. He became a judge. And in fact, when you look at the counseling he gets from Jethro, his father-in-law, not only does he become a judge, he becomes, in a sense, a Supreme Court judge, because he then appoints lower level judges. So they create an entire court system. Pretty impressive. He becomes a constitutional scholar and lawgiver, because guess what? He writes the Torah, which becomes the basis of Israel's law, and it is its constitution. He becomes a military commander, leading Israel into several battles, wars if you want to call it that. Later, during this whole process, he becomes an ambassador, representing God and the people to other nations. That should not be lost on you. We are ambassadors. In 2 Corinthians 5:22, God tells us that we are to act as ambassadors for him. He becomes a prophet. By the way, prophets don't necessarily always predict the future, but they may rebuke the king from time to time. Moses pulls that off beautifully in Pharaoh's court later on. He becomes a husband and a father. And by the way, based on the little incident we had with Zipporah there, the marriage wasn't exactly perfect. There was trouble in paradise. When your wife is the one that's doing the circumcision and says, you know what, you blew it, buddy, even after all that time. And then he becomes God's face-to-face friend, which it says in Deuteronomy. I think that's a pretty impressive resume. After being hunted by the king and rejected by your fellow man, he turns his life around out there in the desert with the sheep. Kind of interesting. And today he is also called a teacher, and the Jewish community today affectionately calls him Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our teacher. And by the way, as I said before a while back, when we wonder what God does for a living, one of the things that he cherishes the most is his teaching, because he's always teaching us. He's given us a book to read, understand, and fellowship with other believers to learn as much as we can. So over time, he builds quite a resume. He matures, takes on this is interesting, he takes on increasingly more important and more challenging assignments as part of that, and he fulfills God's call for his life. He finishes well. That's what we're expected to do, I think. A real life application for us. So how often does God come calling on us to act? How often do we listen? This is not just a matter of hearing God, it's a matter of listening. And listening takes work, because it's really a two-way process. How long will God remain patient with us? You study the judges, you study the kings, the stories of 1st, 2nd Kings, and all of that, you will realize that God has a point where he will draw the line in the sand. How long will we continue to feed our flesh and not bend to his will? This week's news served up a healthy dose of reality. Is judgment coming to America? Maybe. All this time we have been living pretty securely and safely. Issues here and there. But all that changed this week. As a body of believers, we can't ignore God's call in our lives, whether you feel prepared or not. It is time now, I think, to step up. And well, despite Moses' many objections, 5 of them that I could count, a checkered past in Egypt, including maybe a self-justified murder, I don't know if we would call that, rejected by the king, actually hunted with the intent of being killed, and rejected by his countrymen, decades away from his people, at least 40 years, hanging with the sheep, Moses steps up to become God's representative to Israel, and God's representative in the court of Egypt, in the court of Pharaoh. If you think about it, he never retires. This is the interesting news. God never retires. No, Moses never retires. At 120 years old, it is said that his natural force was not abated. And he dies after writing Israel's constitution, teaching, fighting many wars, and even at death remains a robust and very capable leader. A great role model. You know why I like him as a role model? Because he fell, got his knees skinned, got up, and kept going. That's who we are. That's who we are. In summary, God doesn't call the qualified. He qualifies the called. This is a line that Doug implanted in my head many years ago. And it's true, as true today as it was then. We are in a war. Now it's time to pick up our staff and step forward. Lord, we thank you for this time. May these scriptures, Father, be something that call out to us every day. May we start reading more, studying more, learning more, being in your presence. I ask you, Lord, that you put a fence around this congregation, around every person here, Lord, that we would be protected as we get to your business. We ask, Lord, for special healing for those that are ill. The Ott family has been hit. Other families, Lord, Bill's wife, Shelley. We ask you, Lord, just to be with them. Bring them back to full health, and all others, Lord, that we can't even mention now. We thank you, Lord, for the people, Lord, that have been in this part of this congregation for very, very long. We ask you, Lord, also to touch Lee Brooks. And we ask you, Father, to bring all of these people back to us 100% in the very near future. Strengthen us, Lord, for the job ahead, the work ahead that we have. We bless you, Lord, and we thank you in Yeshua's name. Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torat emet, v'chayim olam nata b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has given us the Torah of truth and planted eternal life in our midst. Blessed are you, O Lord, who gives the Torah.